There's always been an innovation economy, and JP Morgan has an entire business dedicated to helping it thrive. By bringing together founders, startups, investors, and ideas, JP Morgan's commercial bank helps empower thousands of high-growth companies that are shaping the present and the future. With tailored banking solutions and a global business network, JP Morgan helps innovators scale for today and tomorrow. Visit jpmorgan.com/startups to find out how they can help you build your future. Products and services of JP Morgan Chase & Company and its affiliates are subject to availability, eligibility, and applicable terms and policies. JP Morgan Chase Bank, N.A., member FDIC. Hey everyone, this is TechCrunch Live, where we help founders build better venture-backed businesses. I'm Matt Burns, and so you've made an API. It connects one thing to another, and it works well. How do you turn that API into a business? That's the topic for today, and I'm pretty excited because we have a great pairing for it. We have Stephany Kirkpatrick, who co-founded and runs Orum, and she raised over $82 million for the company that sells the Momentum API. They call it a simple, smart payments API. It enables customers and businesses access to real-time payment rails without requiring a bank integration. That's a hugely impressive feat, but we're not here to talk about the API itself, but rather how do you get investors to invest in something that's just an API. With Stephany, we have Matt Sueoka from AMEX Ventures, the VC arm of American Express. They participate in Aurum Series A, and I think this makes for an interesting setup. AMEX Ventures is a corporate venture firm, and they tend to have different goals and operational input than a traditional VC firm. And because of that, you as a startup founder need to have different approach and different expectations. We're going to talk about all that. But first, I have to talk about TechCrunch Disrupt. The show is coming back in October, and it's back and is live in person at San Francisco's Moscone Center. Tickets are still available. We have 5 stages of content with huge newsmakers on the Disrupt stage. There's more content like TechCrunch Live on the TC Plus stage. There's breakout sessions, Q&A events, and Startup Battlefield. I hope you can make it. And if anything, come to see me. I'm hosting Startup Battlefield this year, and it's huge. So there's going to be so many names I can mispronounce. I'm very excited. Okay, so one last thing. If you're listening to us on Twitter Spaces, first, thank you. Second, click the link that Alyssa just put into the chat. That's going to send you over to Grip, where you can not only listen, but see Aurum Series A pitch deck. It takes a couple of steps to register, but I really think it's worth it. So with that, let's bring on Stephany and Matt. Hey guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey there. So Stephany, let's start with you. Aurum, you started the company in 2019 and you raised a Series A in May of 2021. It's a $21 million round. I was hoping you could put that in perspective. What was the company doing with the money? What did it need the money for? Where were you guys?
Gosh, it feels like a long time ago now, looking back on the Series A as we've continued to grow the business. But at that moment in time, we were thinking about how do we take something that's starting to work, customer adoption, technology development, and go faster, right? How do we lean into the moment that we're in and find ourselves bringing in more specialists from where we had been, which was generalist focused. So at that moment in time, we were looking to, one, bring in a senior sales or revenue leader, which we ultimately did. We now have a fantastic chief revenue officer, formerly with Marqeta. And we were looking to start to build functions in the company that were going to help us advance to the next phase of API integration. So things like delivery teams, integration support, and ultimately a little bit more in the sales organization besides the leader, since founder-led selling, while very fun, ends up being something that you eventually outgrow as you're getting traction with customers.
Now, right before we went live, you told me payments is your passion. I was hoping you could explain that.
So I stumbled on payments. I'm actually a certified financial planner. So today you'll probably hear me talk about end customers, small business owners, like humans, right? Even though what we sell is an embedded API that moves money instantly. And the reason that my payments passion has developed is because I watched everyday Americans get access to financial advice through technology I'd built previously, also when Amex was on the cap table, different company. And they didn't really do any of the advice when they could. And that wasn't because they didn't want to, it was because payments is a T+4, T+5, T+7 experience domestically. And the kind of use cases where I could put money in a brokerage account, but if I needed it back on Saturday, right, I'd be out of luck. really piqued my interest to like peel back the layers of the onion and understand, why do ACH transfers fail so often? Why is that even allowed? And what problem is that created for us? And then ultimately, why did we build real-time gross settlement systems and then sort of fail to use them? And how can Aurum be part of the solution to make money movement feel like Amazon same-day delivery? Nobody looks at how the package came, but now it comes at night, on the weekends, on holidays, even on Sundays. And we've been able to transform my background as a planner, my interest in tech, and the sort of unification of payments into something really powerful that's changing access to the way money moves in the US and making it faster, which is important to us.
Yeah, God forbid you need money on a holiday.
Literally, except now we run payments at night, on the weekends, and on holidays, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So how did you get connected with AMEX Ventures?
So I have a little bit of history here. I had known AMEX Ventures from a previous startup called LearnVest. And through the fundraising journey at Aurum, as I was out in market, then managing director of AMEX Ventures reached out and said, hey, I understand you're raising. We'd love to chat with you. And so having had that bit of history sort of opened the door for the first conversation. And then it moves quickly from there.
Yeah. Now, Matt, you took over AMEX Venture, running that a little bit ago, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So your portfolio is filled with fintech startups. I'm trying to find the common thread between them. What signals something that AMEX would invest in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, corporate venture firms look to create strategic value in addition to the financial returns that any investor would want to see. And there's sort of different flavors about how CVCs might approach what makes for an attractive investment. For us, we really look to see how the investment platform that we have can help drive innovation across American Express. So largely what we'll do is we'll look for startups that we think have innovative products, technologies, solutions, business models that have some relevancy to a part of American Express's business. And some people think of Amex as their credit card company, but we do so much more than that. We have a global merchant business, we're a global network, we're a huge travel provider. We're also, a large enterprise that has our own kind of needs and issues that we often look to startups to help solve as well. So when we're out hunting for interesting startups to invest in, we look for companies that we think are doing relevant, meaningful things that can have an impact to our broader business. And that's how we use the investment platform.
Yeah. And for me, you get me into the Delta lounges, and I appreciate that. That's very nice.
Plus one.
Welcome.
Yeah. Let's bring up the pitch deck, because before Amex got involved, you had to pitch them, Stephany, and you had to bring this API to life. So I want to go through the first couple of steps here on the problem and the solution that you're providing and how you really illustrated that with your thing. So if you could start with this slide here and explain it to us.
Yeah, before I do that, let me just quickly say what we're doing now on Zoom is what it felt like to raise a Series A, a seed round, and other subsequent rounds at Aurum. And so for those watching and thinking about what it's going to feel like, this is what it felt like. And I think for many of us, what it will continue to feel like. So not only did we have to cross the barrier of like, what is an API product, and really like get to the emotion of the problem, we had to cross the barrier of not being in the room together at all. In fact, at the Series A, I was not able, due to COVID, to meet any investors in person, not for a closing dinner, not for anything. So just, things to think about as you are getting sort of versed in fundraising.
Did they send you a gift box? Did anybody do that?
I mean, certainly the swag box that came was pretty fantastic. So I can't complain about that.
Sure.
But Matt, we might have to get dinner just to make up for old times.
Definitely.
So what this slide is talking about is it's really framing the problem that Aurum seeks to solve. But what it's also doing is effectively framing the size of the market, right? There is a headline number in here. This number has actually changed by about $10 trillion since this slide was created. So we are entering a market that's big and it's growing, not shrinking, right? And so from a fundraising perspective, I think it's important to be able to express that there's a problem people understand, and you'll see in some subsequent slides how we break that down, that's really big. So not only the size of the amount of money movement that moves on this old ACH network, but what happens, it's blind, it lacks data, it has a problem. You make an analog to credit cards and all of a sudden people think about risk management and speed of settlement. And so the job of this slide is to really contextualize something that I obsess about, but for most investors isn't incredibly well-known details of how maybe this particular problem one, exists, and then two, persists as an issue underpinning financial services.
Now, when you went to AMEX, they're different. Did you expect them to understand this problem a little differently than a traditional VC firm?
It's an interesting question because, as Matt just described, we on the outside might think of like, I got my Delta Lounge points or my Amex Platinum, but inside, actually, Amex is a really interesting financial services company. So going in, my expectation was that we were probably going to have a more sophisticated conversation than, say, a generalist investor externally. Because to Matt's point, a lot of the investments are ultimately designed to become strategic partners. And in this case, there was an opportunity that Amex was exploring as a card network, how to also add a multi-rail solution, how to get into bank transfers potentially. How could Aurum teach them about that, possibly be a partner for that, and accelerate aspects of network strategy? So I went in with the expectation that, having done my homework on who was I meeting with, what kind of investments have they done and at what stage, and what was the thesis? Because usually you can find that through great TechCrunch articles or Crunchbase or other places. So my homework and my preparation, I think, well prepared me to be able to adapt a little bit what I would say to somebody more sophisticated in financial services than I might otherwise in the market.
Was that a good assumption, Matt?
Yeah, I think it was the right assumption. At the same time, I think it's really important. So certainly doing your research and your homework is absolutely important, as Stephany mentioned. In addition to that, you kind of have to be a bit agile in the meeting and the conversation itself, because while the company might be sophisticated or might have certain teams of expertise, sometimes the investor or the first person you're interacting with, they may not have that subject matter depth, but sometimes they do. So that's why I think it's important, you do your pre-work, it'll inform you up to a certain amount. And then when you're in the conversation, you can be somewhat direct and just sort of ask, as you're articulating a problem statement or a subject matter area, you can ask the investor, is this something you're familiar with, or is this something your company has faced, or you've seen other companies solving similar problems? You can use that information to then tailor your pitch and your conversation from there. Sometimes that might mean you need to pause, go through a little bit more of the basics around the fundamentals of the problem or the technology. In other instances, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. You can speed ahead into other content.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the next slide.
So this is still kind of framing the problem statement. And what this slide's really doing is introducing that concept that there's actually a better way to move money. So I kind of pinpointed ACH is big. And my talk track was about it being big but old. And as you saw at the bottom, problematic. And so one of the first questions that I often get is but what about real-time payments or FedNow, which are faster payment solutions? And so the sort of answer to that preemptively is, let me tell you about what I already know, right? Now you have a new problem to solve, which is risk management can't just be over the 3-day window of ACH. It's now a 6-second SLA. It's instant. Risk management's now harder. So I'm framing more of the problem. So when you see our solution, you can see, oh, I connect those dots, right? And then you're introducing the complexity of, much like Amazon thinks about, delivering on UPS, USPS, maybe some FedEx in there and their local delivery drivers, and then all the other mechanisms for final mile delivery. Moving money now has many avenues: push to card, FedNow, real-time payments, wires, ACH, 3 kinds of ACH. So this question to do it both instantly and now optimally, it's suddenly much harder for banks, for financial services providers, for fintechs. So this is just continued contextualization. And my goal here is, one, to, kind of tie together the framework of what you're going to see in our solution, and also to validate my knowledge as our founder and background in understanding how these payment systems work, so that we can see the through line to how I'm going to continue to build a company that can go the distance in solving this problem and create meaningful shareholder value for those that join us.
I think it's interesting. You offered to actually pitch this to us like you did back then, right? That was 20 minutes ago. You told me you could pitch it if you wanted to. And I'm curious, how often or how much did you practice this?
So in the very beginning, I practiced inordinate amounts of time. And I would recommend to everyone listening and thinking about this, practice often and practice to multiple different audiences. Our first investor made me practice probably more than I wanted to. And I think the reason that I didn't want to practice isn't because I don't feel like it's necessary. It's because I feel comfortable doing public speaking. That's different, right? Being comfortable public speaking or being comfortable talking is different than making sure that you are getting your point across succinctly, leaving time for questions, knowing how to navigate questions, being prepared for things like, as Matt said, to kind of think on the fly and to do it all in a Zoom box, by the way, where you're like, oh God, my hair, oh no, I'm shiny. You just, all of the things start happening, right? Who's looking at whom, whose name can I see? There's maybe more Zoom boxes than there are spots on my screen. You just go through a myriad number of things. And so, you know, for me and for the investors, Zoom was still very much like an early part of, you know, raising capital when we did this. So there was a lot of practice to make sure that even just like Slack is turned off. The most embarrassing thing is that there's some weird noise that was preventable. So practice and hone what you are trying to get out of the conversation. You can talk for a long time about your company. You can talk in acronyms about your specialty. Are you getting through the message on the problem statement, the direct through line on your solution? And then importantly, how you make money? Is that clear to the person listening? Are you talking too fast, too loud, too slow? There's just so many variables. And I think practicing is where you get to a place where I don't need the slides anymore. Matt, you could take them down and you could ask me about them and I'd talk from my heart. And that's when I think you're in a good place to know you've mastered the pitch.
Yeah, Matt, I was hoping you could talk about this a little bit too. Like you personally, how do you like to be pitched?
Yeah, so in terms of my preferences, you know, I often like to start out the meeting explaining what I'm about and what I'm looking for, and to at least sort of set the stage there. Sometimes the person pitching to me is very familiar and is well aware, and that can be a shorter conversation. If it's someone I don't know as well, it's really important to kind of like lay the foundation and framework of, you know, what company stages are interesting to me, how I'm going to think about strategic value and ways to potentially work together. As I mentioned earlier, different CVCs have different requirements. We don't require signing a commercial operating agreement in parallel to investing. Some other CVCs look for that arrangement. So it's important to kind of start and set the stage the right way there. So I like to at least do that briefly. And then I turn it over to the founder or to the entrepreneur to kind of tell the story about what their vision is, the problem statement they're going after, why they think they're uniquely suited to, you know, be a winner in that space, and how we could work together and collaborate. So I'm flexible on format for the most part. I did want to reinforce something Stephany was saying earlier, in that in the virtual environment, it is a lot trickier. You don't always have the same feedback signals that you can get in person. It doesn't mean you can't have an effective meeting, but what it does mean is if the person on the other side of the meeting is sitting, you know, on mute and you can't really read their reaction, you're not really sure if they're following where you are, then you as the presenter need to stop and pause. Say, do you have any questions so far? Does this resonate with you? You know, lay out and get some feedback in the conversation so you can gauge where to take it next.
That's great. Let's get back to the API and let's bring up the next slide. So explain the problem to us, Stephany.
Yeah, so what's interesting for me about this slide is that we're coming in trying to frame a really big problem, a really big market, and a really complex area of solution. And well, we can use words, which we did, to kind of say why this is a problem. What we did in this slide is we picked, and we could have done this with like so many companies, we picked financial services providers, some of whom are definitely incumbents and some of whom are on the what we're going to call fintech or sort of emerging spectrum. And we pulled direct commentary off of app store reviews and online forums where people were complaining about the problem. So it wasn't like I woke up one day and was like, oh, I want to solve this. I mean, that is true, actually.
Sure.
But it was really to say this problem exists and people are switching platforms. There's loss of traction, and enterprises, whether they're fintechs or they're incumbent financial services providers, they're going to run into real issues if we don't fix it. And consumers are noticing. That is part of the hook for, I think, the investor and part of my belief as to why this has to be solved. And so by highlighting that, I think we hopefully effectively do two things. We show that the consumer or end user cares, which means that when we talk to anyone on this sheet or anyone that looks like this, we're not surprising them with new information. Frankly, what we usually hear in sales calls now is, oh God, that's a bleeding issue, right? So you're validating that the problem is real for people. And most people here will stop you and say, oh my God, and they'll tell you a story. Most investors right now, and everyone listening is probably living some sort of money movement experience that was really painful and they're pissed about it. And so that brings out an ethos that you're now connecting to the problem on a personal level, which I have found to be one of those kind of special X factors in helping people see like that this problem lives in our everyday lives. The other thing this is trying to do is to make sure that we are setting the stage for, like I said on the previous slides, big TAM, total addressable market, and SAM, serviceable addressable market, so that we don't winnow our way down to like great idea, but it only works for like this niche group of people, right? The believability that Bank of America has to solve for this, just like Charles Schwab, just like Robinhood, makes it not a fintech problem. It makes an everybody in financial services problem.
To me, it seems like identifying the problem is a key part of selling an API, because you're selling something that's invisible. You're not selling a product
Absolutely.
per se, right?
There's like nothing to touch and feel. Like normally I'd send you the app and you download it and we do a demo. And it's like, I can demo real-time payments, but it doesn't feel like anything. This feels like something.
Great. Let's go to the next slide.
So now we're starting to get into our value prop, right? This is the kind of shift in the story to one, we've set up who the team was previous to these slides. We've set up the problem and we've started to set up my expertise leading the company to solve this. Now we're setting up the actual solution. And this is something we still say around Aurum, right? We simplify the question from how to move money to how fast. When you work with Aurum, when you marry together two pieces of the puzzle, you don't ever have to think about how. And that's a pretty novel way to think about payments. So this is setting up how we're going to go deeper on an intelligence layer that thinks about the ACH problem and a money movement platform with all the right types of rails and the right orchestration to think about the Amazon of money movement, right? Being able to pick and choose using algorithms, what's the best, smartest, most optimal way to move that money. So this is kind of the setup for how those two features effectively come together in the Momentum platform.
And then I got to get the investor's point of view on this too, right? So is it, Matt, do you feel that this is an effective way of presenting an API, which is something that you deal with a lot in fintech?
Yeah, I think this slide is effective because, again, it goes back to the core challenge of the problem, which the earlier slides and previous part of the discussion kind of set the stage for that. For a company like American Express, we know how difficult it is to move money. And we know that the speed of money movement and the risk associated with money movement is real and it's complex. So this, depiction resonates with me because, because of that understanding, and I see how this type of technology could help. I'm almost kind of jumping ahead in the conversation when I look at this, because I start thinking about how would we integrate? What level of effort would that look like? So if that's any indication, it shows this is sort of sticking with me and it resonates, and I'm ready to kind of move on to the next part of the conversation.
Well, I want to pause there before we move on, because you're thinking about integrating into AMEX, and that's kind of a defining characteristic of a CVC, right? Is you want strategic partners rather than a return on the investment. So as a startup founder, what's a good way to approach that thought or prepare to present yourself as a strategic partner?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want return on investment as well, but we want that in addition to strategic value. Some advice I'd provide to founders would be put some thought into how might you work with us. And working with us doesn't always mean that AMEX is the direct beneficiary of whatever your startup's product or service or technology may be. It could be something that we offer to our customers or to our B2B partners or to others. So putting thought, at least initially, into how might we work together is a good start. And I would frame it as an open discussion versus a defined statement, because there may be opportunities that I can see that you don't see that we could start to discuss and get into.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Well, let's get into the next solution here. We have 5 minutes left, Stephany.
Okay, great. Well, we can move quickly if we want to get through a few more of these. This is starting to outline one of those two boxes, right? We sort of said there's two things under the hood. You put them together and you basically have the next generation of financial services capabilities. And this is starting to get at some key things for investors. Intellectual property, right? There's algorithms here that are patentable, there's IP, and there's a data moat. And on the right, what's kind of in the small print being addressed is some of the common objections or clarifications. So I find that pitch decks go out in advance, right? So I send them in advance and usually then bump them back to the investor in the morning or maybe within an hour of the call. So I want to make sure that while maybe the talk track here is kind of high level, somebody coming back to refer to and ask and answer questions has some of the details that they need. So this is really setting up this concept of finding analogs, right? We enable the same level of risk management as the card networks at a fraction of the cost on ACH. Cards, you remember, you swipe, it's an instant SLA. Matt has the money, Matt does not have the money, you're in and out of Starbucks. ACH is like, TikTok, I'll let you know in 3 days if you had the money. And so you just create, again, that sort of real life, oh yeah, oh, that'd be interesting. We all know ACH is cheap. What if it could be as good as card networks, but not as expensive, right? So those are the kinds of things that my goal with slides like this is to highlight intellectual property, highlight differentiation, and create analog connectivity. Again, because an API and reading documentation really isn't as interesting for investors as it might be for developers who are buying the product.
Yeah, I noticed we're 4 or 5 slides in here, and you only have one slide that says API. You're really focusing on other things than the thing you're building.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, how we deliver it to the market gets talked about. I think, as an embedded product, and, some of the talk track that comes with this is about how we embed financial services. There's an implication that it's an API. So we didn't have to expressly say it. And, we ultimately, through further diligence, post-pitch, do demos, right? And so the API becomes visible. But in the storytelling and the kind of connection between, investor and founder, I have found that going straight to technical can actually kind of disintermediate what is very good conversation. So as Matt said, Matt's wheels hopefully are spinning on strategic value and strategic outcomes for Amex. And we might pause here and have a conversation. Usually somebody will bring up here, Matt might suggest, a part of Amex that is already thinking about this, and we could learn from them. We could talk to the chief risk officer. And for me, that's so valuable. We could integrate and be as part of the supply chain of risk management. There's so many things that could happen. And so this kind of allows for that dialogue to open, as opposed to being in the weeds on the technical piece, which comes later as a part of the diligence for other folks who will join and make sure that we're actually really real and it works, right? This is really just getting into the why and the what.
Matt's nodding along here, so I'm assuming he agrees.
I do. And just to reinforce a few points, one, I like what Stephany was saying about using the, visual for your pitch, but then also having it as a leave behind document. For us, it's really helpful because we sit in so many pitches to be able to have some reference material to go back to. And then if I want to socialize or share this opportunity with some other colleague, rather than me verbally explaining what it is, some of this detail here starts to really paint the picture about why the service is unique and why it's different. There is a proprietary data network. It's not something that everyone else can easily emulate. So I think it hits across a few of those points of the leave behind being very valuable for the investor, as well as highlighting some of the differentiation in the detail.
Now, there's one topic that's not often discussed here, but corporate VCs, I come from a hardware world, or I covered hardware startups for a long, long time. And there's always been fear that pitching to a corporate VC arm will reveal too much. So Matt, I was hoping you could comment on that. What's the risk factors in pitching to a comment? Do you ever feel like the startup is holding things back because they're afraid they might show too many secrets?
Confidentiality and, proprietary information is always something that's important to think about as you're socializing this information. We take all of that information and respect that information appropriately. I would say it's a little bit of you need to say enough about what your service or technology or product is so that we understand what it is and why it is different. That doesn't always require to share, the most secret detailed information. And for sophisticated folks who have the subject matter expertise to understand your product, whether that's the investor or someone else that they're consulting with, they'll be able to ask the right questions, or you can discuss other ways to kind of test and validate the quality of the product itself. Whether it is seeing the demo or using dummy data to test out a service, there are a variety of approaches that you can use that still allow you to protect your information.
Yeah, great answer. Let's go through one more slide. We're gonna go over a little bit. I think this slide really illustrates a good analogy.
This one was like really hard to come up with. I'm not going to lie. We're sitting here on a data asset. We're sitting on a data network. We're building something that can be the next generation early warning systems of fintech. And how do you explain that? How do you visualize it? And one of the objections in, a venture capitalist's mind is like, oh, that's replicable, or it's not big enough, or you don't have enough data to be meaningful. It's also an objection when you're selling an early product. Sounds like a good idea, you don't have enough data, it must not work. So how do we demonstrate that we really have the data? And how do we visualize what that looks like? So we created this visual, and then subsequently in diligence, we'll go through a process where we get into our database and you see the data from this slide. So it goes obviously much deeper than we got some logos off the internet. But what this is doing is, again, it's kind of solving for massive moat. There's already an asset. So we're looking to grow our business around an asset that's already been created, that can be validated. It's big enough that you aren't asking the data quantity problem when you're thinking about, anything in the modeling space. And it's opening conversation. Now, how did we get here? And so now the technical kind of discovery starts to get interesting. The conversation may shift here to how we created this network, how proprietary it is, and how it works. And I have never really feared sharing most of that in fundraising because it is part of the concept of why this is such a differentiated product. It's very hard to replicate just by seeing this slide. So this is actually a particularly fun one because it takes us down a path of really understanding the power of data and the vast array and depth of data that drives a lot of the decision-making within the Aurum platform, which then further validates the believability of us becoming, which we now feel we are, a leading provider of smart, fast, real-time money movement.
You are a good presenter, Stephany. I'm ready to invest.
All right, let's do it.
I don't have much, but I got a little something, and this is great. This has been a very good conversation, and I'm sorry we have to wrap it here, but this has been great because we really tackle two things: how to sell an API and bring it to life, and then also the difference between CVC and VC. And I think this has been great. Stephany, Matt, thank you so much for the input, and I'm going to put up an article about this tomorrow, but you're staying with us. We have another segment of the show called Pitch Practice, and we're going to bring on some entrepreneurs now. They were selected about an hour or two ago, and they have 2 minutes to present their companies to the three of us. And we're looking to get feedback on their pitch itself, not really the company. The goal here is just really to drive home that you need to practice your pitch, and you have to pitch to anyone that can listen. And we have two experienced people here that are willing to listen. So with that, I need to bring up my list. Okay, first company we have coming on is Blazing Audio, and presenting for Blazing Audio is David. David, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey there, David. Well, you have 2 minutes to present your company, and we're going to start the timer now.
Cool. Wonderful. Well, thanks again for the opportunity to present Blazing Audio. We're a recent graduate from a National Security Innovation Network startup studio, where we actually won the competition at the end, winning $20,000 because of our effort to discover a value proposition around some technology developed at the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana, as well as a few other Navy laboratories, where we took what is actually meant to be a non-lethal defense weapon system and found actual extreme value in digital health, whereby we're tackling a big challenge with the company that came out of it, Blazing Audio, to help with assessing hand and wrist injury. So of course, we all have hands and use it to provide value in the world, but we're all at risk of getting repetitive strain injuries like carpal tunnel syndrome, focal dystonia, and a few others. And right now, the number of trained professionals going into the field for dealing with hand injuries, it's being grossly outpaced by the number of people who have the injuries year over year. And we're coming upon an issue where there's going to be millions of people who need care, and they're not going to actually have adequate access to go to a trained professional. We already have a problem because it doesn't matter where you live. There are more people with hand injuries than physical therapists or orthopedic surgeons to see you. And so this technology that was developed in the Navy enables remote care where Physical assessments can be performed by a remote operator at an extremely low price, and our business is deploying this technology. We're operating in a $4.4 billion remote virtual rehab marketplace that's going to be growing over 25% over the next 5 years. And we have a hardware as a service business model to deploy our technology, helping healthcare professionals reach more people and reduce the cost of care. So with that, thank you for allowing me to present a little bit about what we do.
Yeah, David, that was great. And that wasn't a mouthful. I had to Google it. National Security Innovation Network Foundry Pitch Competition.
Yes.
I would have stumbled on that as well. All right, great. Stephany, let's start with you. Any feedback?
Yeah, so it's great to hear you talk about your company and to feel kind of the emotion that you have for it. I sense a lot of pride, which I think is one of the emotions that can be conveyed on Zoom. So I think that came through really clearly. And I sense a really strong sort of bias to innovation in a category that has problems that need to be solved, and the ability to pair people together is difficult. As I reacted to it, I would ideally start with the size of the market and more specifics about what you do. That you won an award is fantastic and should be mentioned, but I would bring it as a close to sort of like nail home the certainty that this solution is working and that you are innovators already award-winning in your category. So finding ways to kind of restructure that story, I think could be powerful, and getting faster to who we are, what we are, and then what stage are you at? And sort of understanding if you are in market, how many customers you serve, things like that could be really interesting in kind of a pitch framework.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, right on. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought overall it was really strong and could definitely feel your passion, and you articulated the problem statement and all that. I would agree with Stephany though that the sort of origin story you had at the beginning, that took a lot of airtime in your pitch. If you shorten that, or as Stephany mentioned, talk about the award later, it would have given you a little bit more airtime to talk about how you're solving the problem and what progress you've made to date, and some of those other details. But it's a really unique, interesting technology. I think the proprietary aspect of how it was developed is interesting as well. So thanks for the pitch.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great, David. Well, thank you so much. And please apply again and we'll get you back on. I want to hear that updated pitch.
Wonderful.
All right, man. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Okay, next up, we have vCare Systems, and presenting vCare is Calypse. I'm sure I said that wrong. You gotta fix me here. There you are. Turn on your mic for me.
Hi, this is Kalpesh from vCare Systems.
Nice to meet
Matt.
you, sir. Hi there.
Nice to see you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see your company here, and I want to hear about it. You have 2 minutes starting now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So vCare's mission is to connect healthcare and unite medicine and physiological data in one place. And the way we strive to achieve this vision is by enabling clinical professionals, doctors, nurses, and pharmacists make effective clinical decisions using our software platform to improve patient outcomes. We have more than 30,000 patients in United Kingdom getting benefit of our platform. They are being served by about 1,200 nursing homes or care homes who are our customers, about 100 pharmacists who also are our customers, and 5 NHS hospitals. They use our platform to provide the services to these thousands of patients. Personally, before starting, as a co-founder, first founder of the company, I worked in investment banks for 15 years, building, complex equity trading systems in London. We raised 2 rounds before this. What I'm looking after this pitch, we are basically trying to raise $4 million as our next round. And there are a lot of health companies in US. I would love to get some introductions following this pitch. Why we started doing this and how we started doing this, we actually initially started building the pharmacy system. And then we saw, personally, my dad was a cardiac patient. I saw a lot of disconnect in the healthcare space, and we started connecting the pharmacies with care homes. So the care homes in nurses use our apps to record medicine administrations. We connect to GP platform to process electronic prescriptions. And then we expanded into the hospitals. So we connect primary, secondary, and tertiary healthcare across UK. We are going to be exhibiting in a lot of trade shows this year in London. And I really look forward to, get some more feedback from yourselves.
Oh, thank you for that. I've been looking at your website, and I think it's really clever the way you illustrate how you connect the different parts of the healthcare system. And I'm assuming that will be in your pitch deck as well, right?
It is, yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Matt, can we start with you?
Sure. Overall, I thought it was a good pitch. You did cover a lot of information about the problem statement, about the solution that you have. I like that you connected it to a personal story that, demonstrates a little bit of, passion and experience for why you're in this space. I also thought it was good near the end. You explained a little bit more about how the product worked. I guess in the first half of the pitch, I was kind of waiting to understand, well, what is the solution and how is it adding value? What is that traction that you're seeing with the number of customers and, clinicians, et cetera, that you've signed up? So if anything, I would encourage you to add a little bit of meat to that part of the pitch.
Absolutely. That's great. Thanks, Matt.
Good feedback. Stephany, over to you.
All right, Kalpesh, it felt very practiced. I think you were well within the 2 minutes able to communicate a variety of numbers of metrics. So listening to you talk, it was clear that you had a couple of touch points that you wanted us to take away about how many users you have in different segments of that software touch point, and how the sort of what I took away from it was the idea that it's integrated was proven out by mentioning pharmacies versus clinicians versus others. You also mentioned being established in the UK market and seeking potentially expansion in the US. So it was clear to me that you were looking for potentially using new funding to help endeavor to do that. What wasn't as clear to me is, why do you need to expand to the US?
Okay, actually,
Is something not working well? Is something not working well in the current business, right? Given that you mentioned thousands, not millions, my assumption would be that there should be lots of total addressable market remaining. I'd also love to understand better the monetization model. Software as a service is something that I think we can jump to conclusions on, but understanding how you're bringing it to market, what the sell point is, because you mentioned different kinds of healthcare professionals using it. Who do you sell into such that it then gets adopted by and used by the different professionals that you described? So those would be places where I would probably continue to enhance. I also liked that you mentioned the potential ask for introductions, perhaps not in a 2-minute pitch, but generally speaking, I find whether a meeting is going to go forward or not, I don't get what I don't ask for. And so knowing that there's potentially intros is usually useful.
Very good. Yeah, that's great feedback. And for me personally, I like to hear how medical startups are finding success and selling into the system, which is often very, very hard. But it sounds like you've already had success. I just wanted to know a little bit more how you're finding that success. Kalpesh, this was great. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
And best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more. We have Seng Choi from Cookie Langs Co. The URL address, I have to say, because it's great, is langs.fund. Okay, Seng, are you there?
Hi there.
Hey there.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. I just wanted to point out that I will be speaking on Seng's behalf. My name is Iron. And
no worries.
Yeah.
All right, Iron, take it away. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Languages. Everyone on Earth knows how to speak at least one, so we know it's not rocket science. Yet why do we struggle so hard to learn others? My name is Iron Kim, COO of Cookie Langs, an award-winning AI-powered language learning platform that succeeds where other solutions are failing. And that's because our solution addresses your actual priority, which is to be conversational in a language and not waste time memorizing vocabulary. The biggest problem with these solutions is that they commit the fatal sin of being boring. A popular app that happens to rhyme with Duolingo has a daily user engagement time of only 18 minutes. They have to bribe you with gamification features like points and streaks to come back each day in order to make what is otherwise an unengaging experience merely tolerable. This is why most language learners end up quitting altogether after only 2 to 3 lessons. On Cookie Langs, however, users spend an average of 3 hours a day. And that's because engagement is at the very core of our product, not just a side feature. The user selects from a gallery of content creators who are all native speakers, and our proprietary AI tech allows you to engage in an asynchronous back and forth as if you're actually conversing with them. Our speech recognition software picks up on how you pronounce the words, so you get feedback right away. And who are these content creators, you might ask? Only some of the most popular Hollywood celebs and influencers like Chris Diamantopoulos and Lindsay Lohan. All together, they have a combined 70 million followers, and this number increases every day. So what are we looking for at this point? Well, we've been experiencing 10x growth year over year for the last 2 years, and that's only from within South Korea. But a product like this belongs to the world, and so we're looking to raise 10 million in order to expand our operations to the US and abroad. We currently have 3 million committed as a follow-on investment, so we're looking for someone to lead. We're re-headquartering here in the US, and we plan to use the funds for hiring, marketing, and further product development. And some exciting recent news to share: we will be featured in the upcoming October edition of Forbes. Thank you.
Iron, that was well rehearsed. Thank you. Very good. Okay, Stephany, let's start with you this time.
I'm going to echo what Matt just said, which is it was very well rehearsed, and I can see how thoughtful your planning has been and how you've prepped for the conversation. You expressed a lot of information, but you did it in a way that really connected a storyline. A couple pointers. On Zoom, I would recommend making sure that your camera is kind of at chest level and above. And I would recommend, just pitching in a place where like you either blur the background or you're all in on that screen color. I know it's a little bit aside from the commentary of what you were speaking to, but it does draw the eyes away from talking to you and trying to make eye contact with you in this setting. The other thing that I would recommend is to think about whether or not you want to lift up your product by putting down someone else's solution. Or do you have the opportunity to instead kind of reframe, why do people spend 3 hours online? And then later tell us how little engagement happens with Duolingo. I'd be much more interested to learn what creates 3 hours of daily engagement, because I don't have 3 hours in my life and I wish I did. But I really liked the idea that engagement's leading to learning to be conversational, which is a total click for me as somebody who is conversational in other languages, but certainly couldn't do all the like vocab tests. So I really found myself resonating with that concept, but wondering why you're putting down another company and a competitor when what you're really given the chance to do is lift up why your product is so excellent.
That was good feedback. Matt?
Yeah, I thought the pitch was very well rehearsed, and as Stephany and Matt said, you packed in a lot of information in a short period of time. I liked how you painted the user story and the problem and the need at the beginning of the pitch. I was certainly following along, and it resonated. I guess part of what I was starting to kind of think about and question as you were going into the middle of the pitch was, I was thinking about, well, users have different learning styles. So, how does your product address that? Is that part of the equation for why you get the greater user engagement? I also, was thinking at the end when you said you had a more limited geographic footprint to start. I also was thinking, do the segments or needs change in other parts of the world? Or is learning certain types of languages require different experiences or, different written versus oral education or practice? So I would have loved to hear a little bit more about, as you want to expand more globally, how is that going to be applicable, or, where would you start? So anyway, those are more kind of, I don't have that language background and expertise. So laying out and understanding the dynamic there and how that connects to your addressable market and your product and your ability to scale, I would have liked to see a little bit more tighter story there. But again, overall, I thought it was great, and it conveyed a lot within a short period of time.
Yeah, that's good. You know who has 3 hours is my teenagers on the couch watching TikTok. If you can replace TikTok,
right? This is like the trilingual era then, apparently.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think this has been great today. Iron, that was fantastic. Keep at it. Just integrate that stuff.
I was just going to ask, is this session recorded? Could we review
Absolutely.
the feedback later? Okay.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. I'm going to plug everything now. So yeah, it's being broadcasted live, and then it's also hosted on YouTube and Facebook video. And then tomorrow I'll put it up again too. And then there's an audio only podcast too. We blast it out everywhere. All right, Iron. Thank you so much. Matt, Stephany, it's been a pleasure having you on today. And I learned a ton. You guys are very knowledgeable on this. So thank you very much for joining us, and everyone else listening. We'll see you next time.